Ruth Bader Ginsburg is missing a second day of oral arguments at the Supreme Court. She's 85, as you might know. She just underwent another cancer surgery, removing a lobe from one of her lungs. This is just on the heels of having broken three ribs earlier in December, and obviously her recovery, this would be difficult for a much younger person. She is not a much younger person. I don't want to talk about the politics or bring up any rank or any of that. I want to talk about a human being and the institution she's a part of. Hi, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. This is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Listen, gentlemen, I think I want to start with you, Scott. As her health has declined, we've seen more and more of this sort of cult of notorious RGB, and I'm not sure it's doing her any good at all. The most recent, and this is a creepy example, was Politico's Roger Simon went on Twitter. We're taping this on Tuesday, the second day that she's missing her arguments at SCOTUS. Roger Simon put up on Twitter today, "If it were possible, would you subtract 1 day off your life and add it to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life for 1 extra day of good health? If just 10,000 people did this, it would add 27 productive years to her life." Scott, when somebody is this old and this frail, does this kind of hero worship push them to do things that you wouldn't do to your own grandmother?
Well, let's give the honest answer to that question that would be given even by the most vociferous fan of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Not 1 damn second. I am not going to sacrifice a bit of my life. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
In the abstract, you may be able to say something that sounds high-minded like that, but in reality, you wouldn't give up a single minute of your life for anybody else's life.
A minute with my kids, with my wife, forget about it.
Yeah, not having. If I could hold the hand of Stephanie for 1 more minute, I would take that over anything else in the world.
Would you take it away from Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
I could actually hold 7 of her hands in my hand.
Okay,
she's a very delicate person.
Thing.
No, I wouldn't take Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life away. So number one is, it's just an absurd question that a writer poses so he can get a provocative clickbait headline so that people might want to read his tired prose. The other thing that occurs to me, and as you were introducing this, I suddenly thought, it's a shame her friend Antonin Scalia isn't there to be at her bedside. Those were two people, at least for whatever their differences, who understood the humanity of a person. And I think all this hero worship does the worst possible thing they could do to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It strips her of her humanity. It makes her into something other. It creates a legend around her and doesn't allow you to actually see her as a human being with her own flaws and foibles and beauties and potentials and abilities. And I think it's insulting. I think it's insulting to do this to a person. It creates an aura around them to which they don't even themselves aspire, and to which they can never live up. And that a face-to-face meeting with that person for 3 hours would quickly disabuse you of any notion of the heroic. There's a movie about her now. I'm sure it's wonderful. But I think that it's so insulting to do that to somebody. And instead, it's appropriate to treat her like a friend, like a sister, like a fellow American, like somebody that you're concerned about. Yes, we have prayers for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I don't care if that offends you.
Indeed. Bill, a reader of mine at the PJM Live blog wanted to know if there was some sort of 25th Amendment solution, and I had to explain to him, no, the 25th Amendment was written for an incapacitated president, and the president only. It doesn't apply to anybody else in the federal government. And I remembered a bit of history that I hadn't thought of in a long time. The 25th Amendment was written in kind of a panicked rush after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, because there was this fear, especially in the shadow of the Cuban Missile Crisis. What if Kennedy was merely brain dead? What if the surgeons had been able to keep him alive down there in Texas? What would happen to our nuclear authority? Where would that devolve if the president is still legally the president? And so the 25th Amendment was written in this very big hurry to prevent that situation from happening. This worry about who would have the legal authority to launch a counterstrike if the Soviets launched a first strike with a brain-dead president? Now, the Supreme Court, of course, is a lifetime appointment, but we saw something like this with John McCain over the last couple of years of his life. Do you think maybe we need some sort of constitutional solution for elected or appointed representatives of the people who just aren't up to performing their duties anymore?
Well, if we had one of those, there would be nobody in Washington would be a ghost town.
I know. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Look, people's minds deteriorate as they get old, and part of that's genetic, and part of that I know from personal experience with my own mom, and her brother, who's 1 year younger, who's obviously my uncle, that so much of that deterioration is based on not using your mind. My uncle Ted is sharp as a tack. He lectures on gas turbine engines all around the world. My mom just didn't have that kind of mental exercise, and her memory is essentially pretty much gone. So a lot of it is the fact that these people are doing so much thinking that I'm not aware of many cases of actually senile Supreme Court justices. I don't think that this is a particular problem, and I'll tell you why I don't think it's a problem. And no one's really mentioning this, and that is because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just as one example, is a member of a pretty tight little fraternity sorority. And I suspect, in fact, I don't just suspect, I have a very solid feeling that if it became clear that one of the justices was mentally incapacitated and getting worse, that they would have a conversation between themselves behind closed doors and have the courage to tell that person, your service has been extraordinary, and we are telling you as your friends and as people who are responsible for defending the law in this country that it's time for you to step down. So I don't think there's any evidence of that with Ginsburg, but anyway.
No, she still seems sharp as a tack, as you say about your uncle.
And we talked before about what the Gorsuch was not too tough to get on the court because he was replacing an arch conservative, and then Kavanaugh was very tough, just a nightmare because he was replacing a moderate. If Donald Trump has a chance to appoint the replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it's my suspicion that they simply will stall it indefinitely. And this is, the strange genius of the Constitution. It always seems to come up right somehow. I always thought it was a defect in the Constitution that it doesn't specify how many people need to be on the Supreme Court. It just specifies that there has to be a Chief Justice. That's all. It doesn't say there has to be 9 people. It could be any number. So if the Democrats decide that they will not pass a nominee that Trump sends to the Congress, unless it's a super big liberal, the end result of that is, at least until the next election, we have an 8-person Supreme Court with a 5-3 majority instead of a 5-4 majority. But there is one thing I do want to say about this, and I really think this is important, real important point. Sorry.
It's thirsty work.
I'll be completely honest with you here. When I hear that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is ill, or appears ill, the first thought that runs through my mind is, good, I hope she dies and gets off the court. She's done a lot of damage to this country, and so on. That's my first impulse. Now, if Donald Trump were to come down with cancer or something, there'd be millions and millions of people saying, hope you die painfully of cancer. But the difference between what we see from progressives and what we hopefully see from conservatives is, I don't pretend to be a superhuman being who has no sense of personal feelings, like on some level that wouldn't be good for the country, and therefore I want it to happen. But I find myself stopping myself and remanding myself and saying that's an appalling and it's a disgusting attitude to have, and it's an attitude of somebody who is so wrapped up in the theory that the humanity of people actually gets away from me. So the reason I'm saying this is because there's an expression I like a lot. I think it really sums up. I think when it comes to political nastiness, it is predominantly but not exclusively on the left. I love that. Predominantly but not exclusively.
That's apt.
And so what I'm saying is this. This is like this just this reflection just hit me. This is in fact the entire essence of conservative thought. This is the entire essence of it. It's not that we're made out of gold and they're made out of clay. It's not that we never have a bad thought ever and oh well, I wish there just nothing but the fun. No, we're human beings just like everybody else. But we should have enough of a conscience and enough sense of decency and enough sense of character and honor and so on to simply not only resist that temptation to go out and make a public scandal of it, but to eliminate that thought from your mind, to catch yourself and say that is a reptilian response to the situation, and shame on you for having that thought. And so I tell you now in all sincerity, I wish her nothing but the best. I genuinely do. I can't tell you that I wouldn't like to see somebody replacing her on the court, but that doesn't have anything to do with it. I wish her a full recovery and health, only because if we lose track of the fundamental humanity and civility and decency that makes this country possible, then it won't be America anymore. So the fact that I had that thought, I'm willing to admit to, but I'm also proud to admit to the fact that I caught myself not just from saying it, but I caught myself thinking it, and I changed my thoughts about it, because that's just a better person who can do that.
Yeah. And I can't cast any stones at you for having that thought, because I admit I succumbed to it as well when I heard first that she'd broken a couple of ribs again, and then again a second time just a couple of weeks later when I found out she was having cancer surgery. It's human nature. We are imperfect beings.
We're better than that, though.
We try to be every day. Listen, I understand RBG not retiring from the court. You know, she lost her husband a number of years ago. Most of her friends are gone at that age. Her best friend, Antonin Scalia, of course, she lost, we all did a couple of years ago. And she loves the court. She loves her staff. That is the thing she has left. And by virtue of the Constitution, that job is hers for as long as she wants it and draws breath. My own personal advice, just speaking human being to human being, is for your own good and for the good of the court that you love, that it may be time to submit that resignation letter and enjoy whatever time you have left. And I hope it's many, many years. But I do know that convalescing at that age and in that condition it's a very difficult job. And while I might not agree with any or many of her opinions, I'm not sure how good a job she's going to be able to do convalescing in as much pain as she must be in. So for your own good, RBG, I might want to wave goodbye, but if not, as I said, it's your job, and by virtue of the Constitution, to keep as long as you want. So that is your right angle on that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.